Okay, let's unpack this. Thinking about starting a PhD, it's less like a straightforward path and more like, well, embarking on a significant expedition.
Uh-huh.
There's incredible potential for discovery, but also, a complex landscape to navigate.
Absolutely. And beyond the deep academic work itself, there's the whole institutional system you're stepping into.
Right.
Understanding the rules of the road is just as critical, I'd say, as mapping out your research questions.
Exactly. And today we're cutting straight to the chase. We're taking a deep dive into the essential blueprint for a PhD student's journey at a specific, highly regarded institution, the Indian Institute of Technology, Kanpur.
Right, IIT Concours.
Yeah,
And are the guide.
their official postgraduate manual.
Yeah, that document is really the definitive source. It lays out, pretty much every procedure, requirement, and milestone from the moment you apply right up to graduation day.
Our mission here is basically to translate that, official manualese into clear, actionable insights for you. What do you absolutely need to know to get in, stay on track, and successfully complete your PhD at IIT Kanpur? Think of this as your essential strategic guide straight from the source.
It's really about equipping you with the knowledge so you can navigate the system confidently.
Yeah,
That way, you can focus your energy where it really matters most, which is, of course, on your research.
right. So let's jump in at the very beginning, getting your foot in the door. What does the manual tell us about the admission process and who is eligible?
Okay, so the manual outlines two main admission cycles each year, typically around April, May, and then again in November, December.
Standard enough.
Yeah, though it does mention that some specific departments or programs might process applications continuously. That gives a bit more flexibility in some cases.
Oh, that continuous option is interesting. And eligibility seems quite varied, doesn't it? Depending on your background and the specific PhD discipline you're aiming for.
It really is.
Hmm.
Covers engineering, sciences, HSS, management, design, even cognitive science. And the manual lists a huge range of acceptable prior degrees. BTech, 4-year BS, various masters like MSc, MTech, MA.
Even things like CA or MBBS.
Exactly. Chartered accountancy, MBBS, BPharm, MCA, MPhil. It's quite comprehensive.
Yeah.
Your specific prior degree, combined with the discipline you're applying to, that's what dictates the minimum requirements.
And those minimum requirements, they involve specific marks or a minimum CPI, that's your cumulative performance index, your average score.
Correct.
I see the manual states the specified minimum is usually 55% or a 5.5 CPI. But departments can set higher bars.
They can, and often do. The manual is clear that departments can prescribe higher minimums, sometimes pushing it up to like 75% or a 7.5 CPI,
Right.
based on how competitive the program is.
Okay, so check the specific department's requirements, not just the general minimum.
Definitely. The manual emphasizes that flexibility.
Now, beyond your degree and grades, there's almost always a mandatory national level test requirement, isn't there?
Yes, that's a really critical piece for most applicants. You generally need a valid score in tests like GATE, JRF, NET, SEED, CAT, or GMAT.
And which test depends on the field again.
Right, like JST is often used for physics PhDs, NBHM for math or statistics, CogJet for cognitive science. It's discipline specific.
Okay, so academic background, check. Relevant test score, check. But the manual also highlights some important waivers for these tests. This seems like a key strategic point for some people.
Absolutely. This is really important. A significant waiver exists for candidates who have a bachelor's degree from centrally funded technical institutes, so IDs, ISERs, and ADTs. If you have a high CPI from one of these places, the manual mentions specific thresholds like 8.0 or sometimes 7.5 for certain programs. You might be exempted from needing a GATE score for admission.
That's huge. What about other degrees?
Well, MBBS degree holders are also mentioned as exempted from GATE, but that's specifically noted for MTech admissions in engineering, not directly framed the same way for PhD eligibility in the waiver section, though departments might consider it.
So, strong performance at other top national institutes can sometimes let you bypass the national test requirement for getting in. And maybe for funding, too. We'll get to that.
Exactly. It's a potential pathway.
Okay, once the applications are in, what's the typical selection process described?
Generally, it involves shortlisting based on your application profile.
Yeah.
Then usually a written test and interview. These are conducted by departmental or program-specific selection committees.
Makes sense. And the manual mentions provisional admission for people still finishing up.
Yes, which is really helpful. If you're in your final year of your qualifying degree, or say you're waiting for your MS by research defense, you can get provisional admission.
Okay,
It's just contingent on you completing all your requirements before the official IIT Kanpur registration date for that semester.
good to know. Now, beyond regular full-time admission, the manual details several special categories. What are those?
Right. There's sponsored admission. This means your employer fully supports your salary and releases you for the duration. Then there's part-time. This is for people who are professionally employed, usually need about 2 years of service, and can actually attend classes on campus. Crucially, you need your employer's consent and no objection certificate.
Right, commuting for classes is key there.
Then external registration. This is geared towards employees and R&D organizations. Again, usually needs 2 years of service, specific undertakings from the employer.
And critically, they have to agree to release you for campus days, right?
Yes, that's vital. You have to come to campus to complete coursework requirements and your comprehensive exam. That residency requirement is non-negotiable for external candidates.
Definitely something external applicants need to factor in. And there's even an option for full-time admission if your employer grants you, like, a long leave.
Yes, extraordinary leave.
Yeah.
If you have a regular job but can get sanctioned leave for the full duration, think minimum 3 years, ideally 5 for a PhD, you can be admitted as a full-time student.
And if you can't finish in that time,
The manual adds that if your leave runs out before you finish, you might be able to convert to part-time status. But that's subject to the usual part-time rules and, again, getting your employer's agreement.
okay, so getting in involves juggling degree and performance criteria, usually a national test score, but definitely check for waivers. And fitting into one of these pathways, full-time, sponsored, part-time, external, or maybe full-time on leave.
Precisely.
Now, let's talk about the practical side. Funding your journey. A PhD is a massive commitment, and financial support is, well, essential for most people.
Indeed. And the primary way IIT Kanpur supports PhD students financially, according to the manual, is through the Institute Assistantship.
And that comes with duties.
Yes, it supports students through either teaching assistant TA or research assistant RA duties.
How long can you get this assistantship for a PhD?
It's typically sanctioned for up to 5 years.
5 years. Oh,
And along with the money comes an expected commitment, usually up to 8 hours per week, doing assigned tasks. Could be helping professors, leading tutorials, lab work, that sort of thing.
and it's not just guaranteed for the full 5 years once you get it right. It's reviewed.
No, absolutely not automatic. Renewal each semester or year depends on 2 key things: keeping up satisfactory academic performance.
Maintaining that CPI we talked about.
Exactly. And also satisfactorily discharging those TA or RA duties you're assigned. If you slip up in either area, your funding could be affected.
Right. Now, eligibility for this assistantship. Does it often link back to those national tests again?
It usually does. To get an institute assistantship, you generally need that valid GATE, SEED, CAT, GMAT score, or perhaps a JRF net qualification.
Ah.
But this is where those waivers become really powerful again.
Uh-huh.
High-performing B.Tech graduates from IITs or master's grads from IITs, ISERs, NEVITES, and science or HSS disciplines,
Yeah.
if you meet those high CPI thresholds like 8.0 or above,
Yes.
you can be eligible for the assistantship without needing those specific national test scores.
So, consistently strong academics at undergrad or master's level from specific top institutions gives you a potential dual advantage, maybe waiving the test for admission and for the assistantship.
Exactly. It's a significant point for anyone who might fall into that category.
That really highlights the value the system places on demonstrated academic excellence from those places.
That certainly does.
Okay, moving on from securing your spot and funding, let's look at the day-to-day reality of being a PhD student there, the academic structure and the rules you'll be living by.
Right, the operational side. Your first essential document here is the academic calendar.
The what now?
The academic calendar. It dictates all the key dates and deadlines throughout the year, starting right from registration.
And registration isn't just showing up right. There's a pre-registration step first.
Yes, academic pre-registration. It's compulsory for all PG students before the semester actually begins.
Why?
It's basically you confirming your intent to register for the upcoming term. Missing this without a really good approved reason means you pay an extra fee.
Okay, so pre-register first. Then the main registration involves choosing courses, paying fees, signing the roll, standard stuff.
Pretty much. But a core rule here, really important. You need continuous registration every single semester or term until you finally submit your thesis.
Every semester, wow.
Yeah, it's crucial for maintaining your student status. There's one small exception mentioned. If you happen to be submitting your thesis within the first 2 weeks of a new semester starting, you don't need to register for that specific semester.
Okay, a little grace period there.
Yeah.
What about this zero thesis credits registration option?
Ah, yes. That mainly applies to PhD students who've already submitted their thesis and are just waiting for their final oral defense.
Ah, okay.
Or sometimes certain students in a summer term who've met minimum credits but maybe don't have a supervisor assigned yet, or are also just waiting for the defense.
Got it. What if someone misses the regular registration window entirely? Life happens.
You can usually do late registration, but yeah, it comes with a late fee. In really exceptional circumstances, the manual allows for very late registration, but often that's restricted. You might only be allowed to register for thesis credits at that point.
Okay. Now, the manual details semester load requirements, how many credits you need to take each term. What's the typical range for a full-time PhD student?
A normal full-time load is defined as 36 credits per semester.
36 credits.
You do have some flexibility. You're generally permitted to go up to a maximum of 45 credits or down to a minimum of 27.
But you need approval for that.
Usually, yes. Going outside that normal 36 credit range typically requires approval from your Departmental Postgraduate Committee, the DPGC, or maybe even the main Senate Postgraduate Committee, the SPGC.
And part-time and external students have lower loads, presumably.
Yes, they have different lower minimum and maximum credit requirements reflecting their other work commitments.
What about summer term registration? Is that required?
For full-time students, generally yes. You're usually required to register for credits equivalent to about half a normal semester load during the summer.
Who's exempt?
External registration students usually are, and those who've already submitted their thesis. Part-time students can sometimes apply for a waiver too.
Okay. Once you're registered, can you change your mind about courses, add or drop?
Yes, absolutely. There are specific periods for adding and dropping courses laid out in that academic calendar.
Need sign-offs, though.
Definitely. It requires endorsements from the course instructor and, crucially, from the convener of your DPGC. That's the faculty member heading your department's PG committee overseeing these things.
Right. And what if a course just isn't working out? Can you withdraw completely?
Yes, withdrawing from a course is possible, usually up to about 4 weeks before the end semester exams.
Same approvals needed.
Yep, instructor consent and DPGC recommendation again. And there's a key restriction. Withdrawing can't make your total semester load drop below the minimum required credits for your status, whether you're full-time, part-time, etc.
Ugh. Can't use it to duck below the minimum load. What about just sitting in on a course for interest, not for credit?
That's called auditing. The manual permits auditing courses.
Does it show up anywhere?
Nope. Audited courses won't appear on your official transcript, and they don't count towards your required credits or your grade calculations, your SPI or CPI, just for your own learning.
Okay. The manual also mentions something called advanced standing. What's that about?
Advanced standing. Okay, that's a provision for students who might have already partially completed a similar postgraduate program somewhere else before joining IITK.
So you get credit for past work?
Potentially, yes. Based on an evaluation and getting approval, you might get an exemption for up to 50% of the minimum course credit requirements for your IITK program.
50%, wow.
And it specifically notes that IITK MSc students who convert into a PhD program can transfer a maximum of 18 course credits towards their PhD course requirement under certain conditions.
Good to know for internal transfers. What if your research actually requires you to be away from campus, like doing field work?
Right. If you need to do research or fieldwork outside IIT Kanpur, that can count towards your residence and credit requirements.
But there's a catch.
The catch is, it's only allowed if the necessary facilities or resources are genuinely not available on campus. You can't just decide to work elsewhere for convenience.
And you need permission beforehand.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You have to get prior recommendation and approval before you go and do the off-campus work. Can't just do it and ask later.
Okay, that covers the structure of semesters, registration, courses. Now, the really critical part for staying in the program, how your academic performance is assessed and what you need to do to stay in good standing.
Yeah, this section is vital. It defines the metrics that determine whether you continue or not. The grading system uses letters A down to F, with points from 10 down to 0.
Standard grading. What about seminars or thesis work?
For non-course work like seminars and the actual thesis units you register for each semester, you get either S for satisfactory or X for unsatisfactory. No number grades there.
S or X. Got it. There's also an I grade mentioned, incomplete.
Yes, I for incomplete. If you get an I in a course, maybe because you missed a final exam due to illness or something,
Right.
there's a specific deadline listed in the academic calendar by which you have to resolve it, complete the pending work. If you miss that deadline, the I automatically converts to an F grade.
Ouch, an automatic F. That's a procedural detail with a huge academic consequence.
Absolutely. Need to be aware of that deadline.
What happens if you get those really concerning grades like E or F?
The manual is very clear here. If you get an E or an F in any course, you must either repeat that exact course later or substitute it with another approved course recommended by your DPGC.
You have to make it up somehow.
You have to. Now, for slightly better but still not great grades, like D or D plus aid, repeating or substituting is allowed conditionally. Maybe if your overall CPI is low, or if you really need a better grade in a specific prerequisite course. But it's usually limited maybe to just one course to avoid overloading yourself.
Okay. And thesis units, you said, are graded S or X by the supervisor.
Correct. Every semester, your supervisor evaluates your research progress for the thesis units you're registered for. S means you made satisfactory progress that term. X means your progress was unsatisfactory. Each thesis unit usually represents about 9 credits worth of research work.
And the SPI and CPI semester and cumulative performance index are calculated from the letter grades in courses.
Exactly. SPI is your weighted average grade points just for the courses you took in that one semester. CPI is your weighted average for all the courses you've taken throughout your entire program so far.
And S and X grades don't count in that calculation.
Correct. Since they don't have numerical point values, SX grades are excluded when calculating SPI and CPI.
Okay, here's where the rubber really meets the road for staying in the program. The minimum CPI requirement.
This is absolutely non-negotiable. The minimum cumulative performance index you must maintain to continue in and eventually graduate from the PhD program at IIT Kanpur is 6.5.
6.5, that's the magic number.
That's the floor.
And falling below that, or having other specific academic issues, can actually lead to termination from the program.
Yes, the manual spells out specific criteria that trigger a review for potential termination due to academic deficiency.
What are they?
Okay, number 1 is your CPI dropping below 6.5. Another is accumulating 2 F grades or 2 E grades or one of each.
Right.
Then there are the thesis grades, accumulating a total of 8 or more X grades across all your thesis units throughout your entire program.
8 X's total.
8 total over the years. Or getting 6 or more X grades in thesis units in just 2 consecutive semesters.
Wow, that's a faster trigger.
It is. Or finally getting an X grade in all the thesis credits you registered for in 2 consecutive semesters.
So, consistently bad progress on the research itself, those X grades piling up, seems to be a major flag.
It really highlights that it's not just about coursework. Continuous evaluated research progress, avoiding those X's, is fundamental to the PhD structure there.
What's the actual process if a student, unfortunately, hits one of these deficiency criteria?
Well, each semester there's a committee called the Academic Performance Evaluation Committee, or APEC. They review everyone's performance.
Okay.
If they identify a student whose record fits one of those termination criteria, a formal show cause notice is issued to the student.
Asking them to explain why they shouldn't be terminated.
Essentially, yes. The final decision on whether to terminate the program or maybe allow continuation under specific conditions is then made by the Senate Postgraduate Committee, SPGC, or sometimes the full Senate.
And is there a way to appeal that decision if it goes against you?
Yes, the manual states there's a provision to appeal a termination decision to the chairman of the Senate. And you can even request a reappeal after some time has passed, but you only get one shot at a reappeal.
So strategically, the absolute keys are keep that CPI above 6.5 in your coursework and make sure you're making satisfactory progress in your thesis work each semester to avoid accumulating those X grades.
Those are the critical survival metrics, yes.
All right. Assuming you navigate the coursework successfully, maintain your CPI, you eventually reach a major PhD milestone, the comprehensive examination.
Right, the Compre. It's a mandatory rite of passage for every PhD student there.
What's its main purpose?
Its primary goal is to test your overall foundational understanding and, well, comprehension of your chosen field. It goes beyond just your narrow research topic covering the broader subject area.
When does this exam usually happen in the timeline?
You become eligible to attempt it after you've completed all your required coursework and you've met that minimum 6.5 CPI.
Okay, prerequisites met. Then what?
The manual requires you to pass it within 4 months of completing your coursework. But there's also a hard deadline. It absolutely must be passed no later than 4 semesters from your very first registration date in the program.
4 semesters from the start.
Yes, though any sanctioned leave periods you took are excluded from that calculation. And extensions to this deadline are possible, but only under specific approved circumstances.
What's the format usually like? Is it written, oral?
It's primarily designed as an oral examination. However, the examining committee does have the discretion to include a written component if they feel it's necessary.
And who's on this examining committee?
It includes faculty from your own department, but significantly, it must also include at least one faculty member from outside your department or discipline.
Ah, to ensure breadth and objectivity.
Exactly. It ensures a broader evaluation beyond just your immediate research group or specialization.
And what constitutes passing the comprehensive exam?
You pass if all but, at most, one member of the examining board is satisfied with your performance. So you need broad agreement from the committee.
How many chances do you get if the first attempt doesn't go well?
You get a maximum of 2 attempts to pass the comprehensive exam.
Only 2 tries.
Only 2. And the manual also notes that if you delay attempting it or clearing it beyond the timelines, you'll get a formal warning letter from the convener of the SBGC.
Okay, so once you've successfully done the courses, got the CPI, and passed this comprehensive exam, what happens next? Is there a formal status change?
Yes. At that point, you formally achieve the status of candidacy for the PhD degree.
Candidacy. That sounds like the official point where you transition from being primarily a coursework student to being a full-time researcher focused solely on the thesis.
That's exactly what it signifies. And achieving candidacy isn't just a title change. It's a mandatory prerequisite for the next major step.
Which is?
The manual explicitly states you cannot submit your final PhD thesis until you are officially registered as a PhD candidate.
Ah, okay. So candidacy unlocks thesis submission.
Precisely.
Now, once you are a candidate, the manual outlines requirements for presenting your research progress publicly. There are 2 key required seminars, right?
Yes. 2 important ones. The first is called the State of Art Seminar.
Okay, see the art.
Yeah. You're required to present this within 6 months of passing your comprehensive exam.
What's it for?
Its purpose is basically for you to demonstrate your deep understanding of the current landscape, the existing research, the, well, state of the art in your specific field. You need to formally report its successful completion.
Okay, surveys the field. And the second required seminar is the crucial open seminar.
That's the big one before submission. This seminar is mandatory and must be given before your thesis can be finalized and submitted.
And it's open
Meaning it's open to all interested faculty and students across the institute. It's designed to give you broad feedback on your completed research work just before you wrap it up. You have to put up a formal notice about it at least 4 days in advance.
Okay. And just like the comprehensive exam had deadlines, there's a critical deadline linked to this open seminar too.
Yes, a very, very important one for managing your final PhD timeline. Your PhD thesis must be submitted to the institute within 6 months of the date you delivered your open seminar.
6 months from the seminar, that's tight.
It is. Extensions are possible if you have valid reasons and get approval, but here's the kicker. If you fail to meet this deadline, including any approved extensions,
Yes.
the open seminar you gave is considered canceled, null and void,
Oh, wow.
and you will have to schedule and conduct a new open seminar before you're allowed to submit the thesis.
So that open seminar isn't just a presentation, it's like starting a 6-month countdown timer for thesis submission.
Exactly. You need to plan giving that seminar very strategically, based on how close you genuinely are to being ready to submit the final document.
Right, timing is everything there. Now, let's dive into the thesis itself, the culmination of all this work and the rigorous final examination process. Who actually guides you through the research phase?
You'll be guided by your thesis supervisor, or sometimes supervisors. Normally, this will be 1 or maybe 2 faculty members from IIT Kanpur itself.
Are there exceptions? Can someone from outside be involved?
Yes, the manual does allow for exceptions. Under certain rules, project employees or senior scientific officers at IITK could potentially co-supervise. And importantly, you can have an external co-supervisor, maybe from another university or an R&D organization.
Need special approval, though.
Yes, getting an external co-supervisor requires special approval from the SPGC.
Can you change supervisors during your PhD if things aren't working out, or add someone?
Yes, changes or additions are possible, but the manual includes a pretty significant rule here. If you change your main supervisor or add a new co-supervisor, you are not permitted to submit your PhD thesis any earlier than 6 months from the date the change was formally approved.
6-month hold on submission after changing supervisor.
Correct. Is presumably to ensure there's enough time for the new supervisor to genuinely get involved, understand the work, and provide proper guidance before submission.
Makes sense. The manual also mentions a doctoral monitoring committee, the DMC. What's their role?
Yes, the DMC. For every PhD candidate, a DMC is formally set up. It consists of your supervisor, plus at least 2 other faculty members, often one from within your specialization and one from outside.
And they monitor progress.
Exactly. Their role is to provide ongoing oversight and guidance. They're required to meet with you and review your research progress at least once a year, and even more frequently semestrally after you've completed 5 years in the program.
Is their feedback formal?
Yes. You need a satisfactory report from your DMC meeting to be allowed to complete your pre-registration for the next semester. So their assessment matters for continuation.
Okay. Now, the actual thesis submission itself, it sounds like there are some strict procedural requirements involved.
Oh, they are quite detailed and very strict. First, you have to include a signed declaration page stating the work is original and, crucially, plagiarism-free.
Standard declaration.
Yes. Plus, a signed certificate page that goes into your official student file. Then, there's a mandatory plagiarism check.
Ah, the plagiarism check. How does that work?
It has to be done via the Institute's Plagiarism Prevention Desk, PPD, using officially approved software like Turnitin or similar.
Is there a target score?
The manual specifies an aim for a similarity index below 10%. If it's higher than that, your supervisor has to provide a formal certification explaining why it couldn't be reduced further, maybe due to standard terminology or previously published parts of your own work.
So less than 10% similarity is the goal.
That's the benchmark they state. And of course, your thesis document itself must strictly adhere to the Institute's detailed formatting guidelines, margins, fonts, structure, everything.
That mandatory plagiarism check with a specific percentage really underscores the Institute's focus on academic integrity.
It's a critical procedural gate. Your thesis won't even be accepted for examination without clearing that check and certification.
Right. So once it's submitted and passes the checks, the thesis goes out for evaluation. To whom?
It goes to an external PhD thesis board, constituted specifically for your thesis.
Who's on this board?
It consists of 3 expert examiners plus your supervisor. There are specific rules about who these examiners can be.
Like what?
At least 2 of the examiners, other than your supervisor, must be from outside IIT Kanpur entirely. And of those external examiners, at least 1 must be based somewhere within India.
Okay, a mix of national and possibly international experts. Are their identities known?
Not initially. The manual states that the identities of the thesis board members are kept confidential from the student until after the final oral examination is completed.
Interesting. How does the evaluation process work then?
The examiners read your thesis independently and submit detailed reports with their comments and recommendations.
What kind of recommendations?
The manual mentions categorizing comments, maybe into major revisions needed, Category 1, minor revisions, Category 2, or corrections typos, Category 3. You, guided by your supervisor, then have to formally respond in writing to all the comments from all examiners.
And revise the thesis.
Yes, you have to make necessary revisions to the thesis document based on their feedback. To proceed to the final oral exam, you need all the examiners to formally recommend acceptance of your thesis, usually after they've reviewed your responses and the revised thesis.
So you need unanimous approval from the examiners on the written work first.
Essentially, yes. Concurrence is required to move forward.
And the absolute final hurdle is the PhD oral examination, often called the defense.
It is. And significantly, as the manual states, the PhD oral examination at IIT Kanpur is an open examination.
Open to anyone at the institute.
Yes, faculty, students, anyone interested from the IITK community can attend your defense.
Who actually conducts this exam? Is it the same thesis board?
Not exactly the same composition. The oral board conducting the defense consists of 4 members plus your supervisors. It must include IITK faculty members and, crucially, at least 1 member from your original thesis board specifically, one who is based within India and can physically attend or attend reliably online as per rules.
Okay, so some continuity from the thesis examiners. What does this oral board actually do during the public exam?
Their tasks are clearly laid out. They review the written reports from the thesis examiners. They check that you've properly incorporated the required modifications into your thesis based on those comments.
Right.
They question you specifically on points raised by the examiners in their reports. They need to authenticate that the work presented is genuinely yours. And finally, they judge your presentation skills and, critically, your ability to defend your research and answer questions effectively during the Q&A.
And passing the oral exam, what's required?
Similar to the comprehensive exam, you pass the oral examination if all but at most one member of the oral board is satisfied with your performance.
So broad agreement needed again. What if you don't pass?
If the candidate doesn't pass, the oral board has a couple of options. They might recommend a re-examination after a certain period, perhaps with specific conditions for improvement, or, unfortunately in some cases, they might have to declare that the candidate has failed the program at this final stage.
Wow, that's a really comprehensive and, frankly, quite rigorous final process written evaluation, revisions, public defense.
It ensures a high standard for the PhD degree, definitely.
Now, what if somewhere along this long PhD path, a student realizes it isn't the right fit for them in the long run? Does the manual describe any alternative paths or sort of exit options?
Yes, it does provide some structured exit options, which is important.
Like what?
For students who were admitted to an engineering PhD program, but who did not already have a master's degree in engineering when they started,
Okay.
there's a possibility for them to request to exit the PhD program with an MTech degree instead.
How does that work?
It requires being in the PhD program for at least 2.5 years first. Then you have to formally request the change, get Senate approval, and this is key. You must fulfill all the requirements for the MTech degree for that department. That includes completing coursework and usually a substantial MTech thesis.
So it's not an easy out, you still have to earn the MTech.
Exactly. It's converting the PhD registration into an MTech registration and meeting those requirements.
What about PhD students in other disciplines, not engineering, or those who did have a master's already?
For other PhD students, the manual says they might be able to request exiting with a different degree or maybe a diploma if there's a relevant predefined template for such an exit pathway approved by their specific department.
Ah, depends on the department having a plan.
Yes. And again, they'd need to meet all the specific course and thesis or project requirements for that alternative award and get all the necessary approvals.
And what about students who started in a master's program at IITK and then converted into the PhD program? Can they switch back?
Yes, that's a clear option mentioned. They have the option to revert and exit with the original master's degree, provided they've already accumulated the total credits required for that master's award.
Okay. Now, if an exit option, like the MTech one, requires submitting a master's thesis, is there a deadline for getting that done?
Yes, and it's a critical one to be aware of. If you are granted an exit option that involves submitting a master's thesis, you must submit that thesis within 6 months from the date the Senate formally approved your request to exit the PhD.
6 months to write and submit the master's thesis.
Yes. A single extension of 3 months might be possible with strong justification. However, and this is strict, if you fail to submit the thesis even within that extended time frame,
Then what?
the exit option that was granted is automatically canceled, and your original PhD program registration will be terminated.
Wow, okay. So if you go for an exit option with a thesis, you absolutely have to meet that submission deadline.
It's a firm deadline with a very clear consequence if missed.
That's important to know. Can you change your registration status during the PhD? Say you get a job. Can you switch from full-time to part-time?
Yes, changing status like that is possible, but it's under specific conditions and not automatic.
What kind of conditions?
Well, for example, converting from full-time to part-time might be allowed if you secure relevant professional employment. But typically, you'd need to have already completed certain key academic milestones in your PhD. First, like finished all your coursework and passed the comprehensive exam.
Makes sense. Need to be past the intensive campus phase.
Right. And you'd also need to get a no objection certificate, NOC, from your new employer, allowing you to continue PhD studies part-time.
Can you switch back and forth?
Usually not. The manual often implies these conversions, like full-time to part-time or vice versa if you leave a job, are allowed only once during your entire program. And your progress as a part-time student would then be reviewed periodically, just like any other part-time student.
Okay, so it sounds like there are some safety nets and alternative routes if the PhD doesn't work out, but they definitely come with their own set of rules, approvals, and strict deadlines.
Absolutely. They require careful planning if you consider them.
Now, what about just needing to take some time off? Life happens during a long PhD. Does the manual cover leave rules?
It does, yes. It outlines various types of leave available to postgraduate students.
Like what?
Well, there's personal leave or casual leave. The manual specifies limits on the number of days you can take per year or semester and whether any unused days can be carried over.
Okay, short breaks. What about illness?
There's medical leave. Again, it has day limits per semester or term, some carryover provisions. For more serious or prolonged illness, there are provisions for longer stretches, but that would require submitting a proper medical certificate from the Institute Health Center or authorized doctor.
And what about major life events? Are there specific provisions for, say, maternity or paternity leave?
Yes, and these are important. The manual explicitly sanctions maternity leave for female students, typically up to 180 days per child, for a maximum of 2 children.
180 days.
And paternity leave for male students is also mentioned, usually a maximum of 15 working days per child, again, for up to 2 children.
Do these affect your assistantship?
Importantly, the manual often clarifies that taking sanctioned maternity or paternity leave does not result in the loss of your institute assistantship during that period. These leaves can also usually be combined with other types of leave, if needed.
That's a crucial protection. Now, is there something for longer breaks beyond just a few days or weeks, like taking a whole semester off?
Yes, there's something called semester leave or term leave. This is for more substantial periods away from the program.
Who qualifies?
It has to be sanctioned for bona fide reasons, things approved by the Institute. For PhD students, the manual typically states you can be granted a maximum of 2 semesters and 1 summer term of this type of leave throughout your entire program duration.
Are there eligibility criteria?
Normally, yes. You usually need to have already completed your minimum course credit requirements and spent a certain amount of time in the program before you can apply for semester leave, unless it's for very compelling medical reasons, which might be handled differently.
Okay. What are the consequences if you're just absent without getting any of this sanctioned leave?
The manual is very clear and strict on this. Absence without proper sanctioned leave will result in the loss of your financial assistantship for the entire period you were absent without approval.
Boost funding. Anything else?
Furthermore, it could potentially lead to formal disciplinary action against you or even the termination of your PhD program altogether.
Oof. So the bottom line is, communication is key. You absolutely have to follow the proper procedures and get formal approval for any planned or even unplanned absence.
It's essential. Even when life requires you to step away unexpectedly, informing the department and applying for leave retrospectively if necessary is crucial to avoid serious repercussions.
Right. Okay, finally, the ultimate goal, graduation. After navigating all these rules, requirements, milestones, exams, what's the final checklist? What do you need to have ticked off to actually get that PhD degree from IIT Kampar?
The manual provides that final, comprehensive list of requirements you need to meet for successful graduation. First, obviously, you must have passed all the prescribed courses outlined in your specific PhD program structure.
All courses done and met the performance standard.
Yes, absolutely. You must have achieved and maintained the minimum required cumulative performance index, which, as we keep saying for PhD students, is 6.5. You need that 6.5 or higher at the very end.
Okay. Are there time limits involved, minimum or maximum duration?
Yes, both. You must satisfy the minimum academic duration requirements for the PhD program. The manual typically lists this as a minimum of 6 semesters, which is 3 years of residency.
Minimum 3 years. And a maximum.
Yes, you must not have exceeded the maximum permissible duration for completing the PhD. For full-time PhD students, this is usually set at 7 years from your first registration date.
7 years max. Plus any extensions.
Plus any formally approved extensions you might have been granted along the way due to leave or other circumstances.
Okay, so past courses, CPI equals 6.5, met min duration within max duration. Anything else on that final graduation checklist?
Yes, a few more crucial points. You must also have fulfilled any additional specific rules or requirements that might be stipulated by your individual department or academic program.
Department rules matter too.
They do. You also need to have satisfied all other general requirements specified by the Institute Senate and the official ordinances. You must ensure that all your financial dues to the Institute library fines, hostel fees, everything are completely cleared. No pending dues.
Clear your accounts.
And finally, importantly, you must have no pending disciplinary cases against you within the Institute system.
Clean record needed.
Clean academic, financial, and disciplinary record. That's the full package for graduation.
Phew. Okay, we have covered a tremendous amount of ground today. We've essentially walked through the entire PhD life cycle as it's laid out in the IIT Kanpur Postgraduate Manual.
Yeah, from the very beginning.
Right. From meeting eligibility criteria and navigating the admission process, securing that vital financial support, then getting into the nitty-gritty of the academic structure registration, courses, credits, summer terms.
Then the crucial part about maintaining satisfactory academic performance, keeping that CPI above 6.5, avoiding those deficiency triggers like too many Fs or Xs.
Hitting those major milestones like the comprehensive exam and the required state-of-art and open seminars, understanding their timings and implications.
All the way through the really rigorous thesis submission process, the supervisor role, the DMC, the plagiarism checks, the formatting.
And the final examination hurdles the confidential thesis board evaluation, the revisions, and that final open oral examination.
We also touched on the alternative exit pathways, like the MTech option, and the rules around leave, personal, medical, maternity, paternity, semester leave.
And finally, landing on that comprehensive checklist of requirements you need to satisfy to actually cross the graduation finish line.
It really, really underscores that while the absolute heart of the PhD is that deep independent research you're doing,
Yeah.
the journey itself is very firmly structured and guided by an incredibly detailed institutional framework. It's not just about the research idea.
Exactly. And understanding this framework, getting familiar with these rules in the manual, it isn't just about, complying with bureaucracy or ticking boxes.
No, not at all.
It's genuinely empowering for you as a student. Knowing that 6.5 minimum CPI helps you prioritize your coursework and understand the stakes right from the start. Knowing the deadlines for the comprehensive exam and that critical open seminar allows you to strategically plan your research phases, your writing phases, and hopefully avoid those last-minute panic situations or unexpected hurdles.
Right. Understanding the leave rules means if life throws you a curveball, personal issues, health problems, you know how to take necessary time off properly
Yeah.
without jeopardizing your registration or your funding.
Yeah, and even knowing that those exit options exist, even if you never use them, it can provide a sort of psychological safety net, a sense of flexibility and control over your own academic path.
It absolutely turns the manual from just being, a dry book of rules into a kind of strategic roadmap.
Yeah.
It helps you anticipate challenges, make informed decisions at every single step, and ultimately it should help you allocate your most valuable resource, which is your time and your intellectual energy, more effectively towards the thing that really matters, your research.
Well said. So with all these procedures, requirements, timelines, and evaluation criteria laid out in such meticulous detail as we see in a manual like the IIT Kanpur PG manual, here's something maybe to mull over as you navigate your own PhD path wherever you are. How does the very structure of an academic institution, the way these processes are defined, the timelines imposed, the specific ways progress is measured, how might that subtly or maybe even overtly shape the nature of the research that gets conducted within its walls? Does the pressure to meet these structural requirements perhaps influence the kinds of research questions people feel they can ask, or the methodologies they choose to employ, or even just the pace at which discovery can happen? Something to think about.